Hello students, I am Dr. Aruna Mohan from University of Delhi, and today we are going to discuss conduction of nerve impulse. Students, you remember that in previous sessions we discussed about nerve cell, about its structure, and also we emphasized on the fact that a nerve cell is a special cell. It has dendrites, it has axon, and having dendrites and having axon has some purpose for nerve cell functioning. Now, when we talk of conduction of nerve impulse, we are going to discuss whenever there is impulse or there is a stimulation, how that stimulus is conducted from one end of nerve cell to the other end of nerve cell, or in other words different parts of the body. To understand this, we have to understand nerve cell once again. One thing is very clear, dear students, that neuron is an excitable cell. You can excite it, and that is how the stimulus will be conducted. That is how the nerve conduction will take place. So, neuron is an excitable cell, that is one point. Now, the membrane of nerve cell is in a polarized state. How it is in polarized state? The reason being that it has ion channels. If I say channel, I mean the ions can pass through these channels. So, presence of channels is important in case of nerve cell, which will keep it polarized. I am going to explain you little later what I mean by polarized condition. So, again coming back to conduction, the nerve cell membrane has ion channels which are present on the neural membrane. Ion channels will allow movement of ions, but again it is selectively permeable. The word selectively permeable will imply that some ions can pass through and some ions may not be able to pass through, or some ions will pass under certain circumstances. Now, after knowing all these facts, we now know that our neuron is excitable cell, its membrane is polarized or in a polarized condition. It has ion channels which are selectively permeable. Now, when there is no stimulus at any moment, we call it a resting nerve cell, and the condition is polarized. Now, I am explaining what I mean by a resting neuron. When neuron is there and impulse is not there or stimulus is not there, then we call it resting neuron. First, we will understand what is resting neuron, and then we will understand how nerve impulse is conducted, because definitely at that time it will not be resting. So, resting means when conduction is not taking place. So, what is the condition of a nerve cell in the resting condition? When neuron is not conducting any impulse, at that time the axonal membrane is more permeable to potassium ions. You know about potassium ions, dear students, and you know about sodium ions, both are positively charged, and you also know about protein ions which are negatively charged. So, as I told you, the axonal membrane in the resting condition is more permeable to sodium ions which are positively charged, and is almost impermeable to sodium ions which are also positively charged, and also it is impermeable to negatively charged ions, and we know these are protein ions. So, what will happen in the resting potential? The potassium ions are able to move. The proteins ions are not able to move, and they are present inside the exoplasm. Also, dear students, try to understand that the exchange is taking place inside the exoplasm and outside the exoplasm. So, in the resting condition, the exoplasm inside the axon will contain more of potassium. Why? Because potassium ion is freely permeable. The ion channels allow its permeability. So, it is able to enter. Now, sodium ions are not able to move. So, it is going to be in low concentration inside the exoplasm. Exoplasm means the plasma inside the axon of the nerve cell. Now, the negatively charged protein ions inside the exoplasm are going to be very high because they could not move outside. So, try to understand this particular fact that in a resting nerve cell, the membrane is having the particular feature and it will allow movement of potassium ions positively charged. It will not allow movement of positively charged sodium ions and it will not allow movement of negatively charged protein ions. Now, the situation which is created after all this is a resting condition. The nerve cell is resting and the potential is resting. So, we have understood a fact that inside the exoplasm, the potassium ions concentration is high, the sodium ion concentration is low and negative protein ion concentration is also high, and that is a condition in the axon, in the exoplasm. Now, we have to see what is the situation outside the axon, that is fluid outside axon. Definitely the potassium will be low because it has entered in. Sodium will be high because it could not enter, and this will form a gradient. It is called concentration gradient. I repeat these exchanges because potassium is moving in, that is why it is low outside, more inside the axon. Because sodium is not able to move, that is why it is high outside and low inside, and protein ions are not able to move outside, that is why they were more inside. Now, this is a concentration gradient which is created because of sodium and potassium ions. This gradient is very important for any nerve cell. Before I go further, I would like to tell you that we do look into our sodium intake. We always think how much salt we have eaten, how much sodium we have eaten, whether we should take less or more, whether it will affect our BP, etc. We always think of sodium. We never think of potassium. Please remember that in our body, sodium potassium pump is important. For any cell membrane, there is sodium 3 molecules going out, then 2 potassium are coming in. Unless both are going in and out, 3 out and 2 in, we cannot handle membrane transport. That means, if sodium is important, then potassium is also important. Coming to sodium potassium pump in context to our nerve cell today. Now, when sodium potassium pump starts working because a gradient is created, then ionic gradient across resting membrane becomes very important, and it is maintained only by active transport of ions by sodium potassium pump. 3 sodium will move out, then 2 potassium will move in, and this exchange will allow our membrane to work. In this case, the membrane of a nerve cell. The main point to understand here is that the nerve cell which is in resting condition at the moment is also to be known as in a polarized condition. What do we mean by this? So far we have talked about concentration gradient and also we have talked about sodium potassium pump. So, one thing is very clear, that gradient is maintained. Now, if gradient is maintained, it is called a polarized condition. Please don't forget that our nerve cell is in a resting condition. Now, in the resting condition is also a polarized condition. In the polarized condition, the outer surface of axonal membrane possesses a positive charge. You very well know, children, why it possesses a positive charge, because it has more of positively charged ions. The inner surface of axonal membrane becomes negatively charged because protein ions could not move out. The main point here is that in a resting condition, or which is also called polarized condition, in any axon of a nerve cell, the outer side of the membrane is positively charged and inner side is negatively charged. Now, this condition will change when nerve cell is stimulated. So, please do not forget the polarized condition state of a nerve cell, the outer membrane positively charged and the inner membrane negatively charged. Now, I should explain you the resting potential. You know that I started this session with resting nerve cell, and all the situation which I have explained so far was for a resting nerve cell, or nerve cell was in a resting condition and the stimulus was not passing through it, and we have understood about the concentration gradient, about the sodium potassium pump. Now, I explain you that because cell is resting, a resting potential is created by all this situation which we have understood so far. So, what is resting potential? The electrical potential difference across the resting plasma membrane is resting potential. I repeat, the electrical potential difference across the resting plasma membrane is resting potential. So, children, in today's episode, we have understood how resting cell behaves, the nerve cell in a resting condition when stimulus is not applied to it. We have understood the movement of sodium ions, potassium ions across the channels. We also know about the ionic channels on the membrane of a nerve cell, which are selectively permeable, which allow a movement of potassium ions more than the movement of sodium ions, which will not allow movement of negatively charged protein ions from inside to outside, and that is the reason why the membrane is positively charged outside and negatively charged inside, and this creates potential gradient, and this gradient is maintained by sodium potassium pump, which is very important for any membrane to work. During this pump action, 3 sodiums move out and 2 potassium move in, and this creates a situation which we call resting potential, which is very important for nerve cell, and resting potential is the electrical potential difference across the resting plasma membrane. So, in case of nerve cell, the movement of ions and the potential difference becomes an important aspect which we have understood in this session. In the next session, we will understand how nerve impulse is conducted through the nerve cell and how changes will take place in the condition of resting potential. Thank you.